All right. So today we are going to be hearing from two experts in the composting arena, both Jason Gearheart and Dan Perkins. I'm having some issues moving forward. Okay, finally. So today we're going to talk about composting, both leaf-based and vermicomposting. Then we're going to move on to statewide and regional updates, and then have some Q&A and partner sharing. So Jason Gearhart is from his company, Integrated Elements. He's a student of the Soil Food Web School under Dr. Elaine Ingram, and he started Integrated Elements Compost LLC because of his passion for composting and the results that he's seen in its applications. He's a small farmer in Bartholomew County where he works to educate anyone interested about soil health and its benefits to the earth. So Jason, if you want to share your screen, you can take it away.
How do I share it? Oh, wait, no,
I have to stop sharing.
You'll continue. Okay. All right, continue. Here we go. Can you see me? There it is. All right. So, okay. So, my name is Jason. I've been doing the Soil Food Web School for several years, and I'm in a consultancy program right now. Megan asked that I talk about worm compost in particular. But I can't really do that without talking about compost, because she asked that I do several things. One, my process. Two, why I do the way I do, or why I do it that way. And then the third thing is how this benefits soil health. So just to give you guys an idea of how I do it, I start off with a thermophilic process. I do a compost pile about 200 to 280 gallons in size. And I use these bins right here, these little expandable bins. They're plastic, 60% brown, 30% green, and 10% high nitrogen. The recipe that I've come up with right now that really works well is anywhere from 5 to 7.5 gallons each of cracked corn and alfalfa sprouts, or compressed alfalfa pellets. And what this does is it really gets it heated up to the point of 131 degrees to 160 plus. So then what I do is I basically turn it after I get 3 days at 131, or 2 days 150, or 1 day at 160. If it gets to 170, I've got to turn it right away, partly because you run the risk of it, creating alcohol and then internally combusting. So I don't want it getting that close. So then what I do, and so it just depends on a lot of different things, how long these go. So this particular pile right here, I number them so that I have a way to track them. Almost got to what I call complete. And so what that means to me is that it gets two turns with the center, each layer within the center for the approximate time. And this one just gassed out at about 3 hours, actually, because of the 0-degree temp that we were having. It was really close, but that's okay, because the reason why I do this is I then put the
All right, Kaylee, I appreciate that. How are you in there?
Okay. So then what I do is, in a pile like this, I would use this also as worm food. So the reason why I do it this way is because I want to create what we call a biocomplete compost pile that has all the microorganisms that we're looking for, we're like your protozoa, your nematodes, bacteria, obviously, and then also fungal components as well. So that then becomes food for the worms. So basically what I'm doing is I'm breaking it down first to then feed it to the worms. Let me see if I can't. Hold on a second, guys. There we go. Pull this down here. Okay. So then from that pile right there, we have this, which is broken down right there. To give you an example, these two piles right here are pile 60, for just for references for myself. And I made this on the 1st of December, and it went through 5 turns and was done by the 18th of December, cooling down, and then I went ahead and added it on top of these other piles that I had. And then, so I checked the biology. It's got everything it needs. It's got some nematodes in there. It has fungal hyphae. It's got the protozoa. It's got everything that it needs. After I do that, then what I do is I put it in my worm bin. So this right here is a 4x16 and about 2.5 foot deep container that I put the worms on top. And then I have a blade that runs across the bottom here. And then what that does is it drops down into the bins. And then from there, what I do is I screen it out let me show you here. First one, oh, shoot. There we go. This right here is through a 1/4 inch screen. And this right here is an 1/8 of an inch screen. And so then I also check the biology of those to make sure that everything is complete. There is a shelf life to this that I'm trying to figure out, like how long. I prefer to use it just as soon as I get it out, or if I sell it, I want to make sure that it's still got some moisture, because the moisture is really, really, really important. Then I've also got another bin here that I just recently purchased from a company called Hiawassee. It's smaller, and I got it basically because I just wanted to experiment to see which would be better, a larger bin or a smaller bin. I've got both of these in my greenhouse right now, and they seem to be doing pretty well, even through these temperatures right here. The worms do slow down a little bit, but they still do the job. They still break things down. And the reason why I use the thermophilic process is because worms won't eat everything. What they'll do is they'll just eat the biology, maybe some organic material. Their mouths aren't huge, so they're not going to be able to get a whole lot. So then what comes through is more combination of castings and the food source. So the product that I'm making right here has got a combination of vermicast and the biocomplete compost, or biologically complete compost is what we call it. So let's see. Basically, what I put in the worm bins is a combination of compost that I make. If it doesn't go through its complete cycle, it's still broken down. They'll break it down even more. And then if I make like compost tea or compost extract, I'll put that on top there too. So next part I was going to show you guys here was why that's the reason why I do what I do. So, I mean, the long and the short of it is I call myself a microbe farmer. I basically farm microbes for the worms to eat. Or if I just use the compost itself on the ground or in my plants, then it becomes food for them as well. So I'm feeding the soil that way. So that's the reason why I do what I do. And then these are some of the things that we find underneath the microscope. So to feed the soil, we're looking for things like, you know, a fungal hyphae right here. And then we've got a protozoa, a testate amoeba. And those both help with nutrient cycling. So what happens is the worms will come in, they'll eat this, and then what they'll do is they'll excrete, what they excrete out then becomes what is plant available, because plants themselves will invest a lot of energy into their root systems. More energy into the root systems on food that we would eat, not so much on like weeds, but definitely on foods that we eat. You know, 50% at least goes into exudates. The exudates go into the soil, basically communicates to the bacteria and the fungal hyphae, hey, this is what we need to eat. This is what I need from you. They go out, break it down in the sand, silts, and clays, but it's not quite nutrient, or it's not plant available until you get things like this eating on the bacteria, and then their waste then becomes nutrients um, for the plants. Here's another picture right here of some testate amoeba, fungal hyphae right there. Another mass of it right here. So what we look for when I go through and look underneath the microscope is, you know, making sure we've got all the right numbers, you know, all the right numbers of fungal hyphae, all the right numbers of bacteria, because we're trying to create a ratio, a fungal to bacteria ratio to supply enough nutrients, or to supply that right balance for the plants that we're providing. I'm going to show you, some worms here directly. So these are these guys underneath here. You can see that I've got all that material that I've composted, and they're chewing on that. Another thing that I like to do for my worms is take some, like if I get some material that's not broken down quite enough, like if I get a mat of grass, you know, then what happens is I'll put that in there and they just chew that up. I'll put cardboard over the top of them as well. And you can see down here, this is really helpful during the wintertime, as I'll put another layer of plastic over the top of them. So it gives them an extra layer of protection, warmth. And here would be, you know, some nematodes that we have in the soil or in the compost as well. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, this was really cool, actually. I saw this yesterday. This is a microarthropod. And so this would be also beneficial in nutrient cycling as well. I found this in one of my piles of worm compost as well. So, and that's about it. Does anybody have any questions or anything else that they want to see or ask about?
I have a question, Jason. This is Brooke here from Extension.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry I got here a few minutes late. Am I understanding right that you do a thermo compost of 60% brown, 30% green, 10% high nitrogen? You pre-compost by thermodynamic composting for about 2.5 to 3 weeks before you then put it into your worm bin?
It depends. So it's thermophilic is what we call it. It really kind of depends. This is kind of one of those things where it becomes an art and a science, because I say 60% brown, and that could be mostly wood chips, sometimes leaves or anything that kind of appears like it's been dead for a while or broken down. I'll put that in there. So that, depending on how long that's been composed, also adds to the variability, what time of year that it is. So like this most recent pile that I made, I used a lot more grass because it was dry and it was late. If I do it in the springtime, then I'll have, another variability of like that real fast growth of grass and green and high nitrogen that's already in the grass as well. And then the 10% high nitrogen, that's kind of like, it varies. Like during the winter time, I'm going to use more because I want to make sure that I can get it through the 3 cycles or the 2 turns anyway. During the spring or in the summertime, I'll probably back it off a little bit just because I don't want to use as much. And then, because then what you're doing is like, I have gone to the point where I've turned a pile 7 times and I'm just like, okay, I'm done. And then after you let it get to ambient temperature. So that's the part where you're kind of waiting on to let it get to the ambient temperature to then use it either on the soil or feeding the worms. And sometimes what I've done, like last year when it was really cold, I didn't let it get to ambient temperature. I put it in when it was a little bit warm just to give it an extra layer of insulation for my worms.
Thank you.
Yeah, did that answer your question, Brooke?
Yes, thank you.
No worries.
And while my mic's still on, I just noticed Jesus asked if you have ever had to deal with the Asian jumping worm, which I'm very curious about as well, as we are trying to control the spread. And
I don't even know. I know I've heard of it. I don't know what to look for that. And I don't know enough about it, to be honest with you, Brooke. I don't know if if there's a certain environment that's that's allowing that to happen, so part of the reason why I do the pre-composting is because if I didn't, I run the risk of having gnats, for instance, because then, they're going to come in and chew on that. So I'd rather contain it where I can. So I don't know enough about the Asian jumping worm.
yeah, sure. That's prevalent. So thank you.
Yeah. But I have heard that, but I don't know what to look for on that. Apologies. And that's something I could probably dig into as well.
Terry, I can
Yeah.
send you our handout on the Asian jumping worms if you could send it along to Jason.
Sure, I could be happy to do that. Thank you, Brooke.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
appreciate that.
The Asian jumping worms are they're so new. And they've been having a lot of, they're still trying to figure out what it does to soil. But there's a lot of good science behind it. And thankfully the only place I know that it exists here in Indiana is in St. Joe County. I believe it was just released a few months ago that they're out there.
There's actually a huge hot spot in southern Indiana. So
Is there? Okay.
around there, yeah. And I think they found some in Gary as well.
They're spreading quick.
And
Gotta love
Indy,
invasives.
actually. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's scary, but whatever.
Yeah. So there's a couple of questions in the chat. So
Sure.
I'm just gonna help kind of address some of those. So Colson asked, is the changing pH of the wood chips ever an issue?
I don't know. And I don't really test for pH when I do this. I basically just look for the biology within the compost. The aging process does help with, like, so if it sits for a little bit longer, I'll see some fungal strands, which is just beautiful to me. It's doing its job. But I don't test for pH.
And in an agriculture application or a location, how do you control beneficial nematodes versus for the harmful ones?
So that's a really good question. I know what I've heard. I've not had to manage it. Full disclosure, I mean, I just started this business about a year ago. And so I know what some of the studies are out there are saying, but I haven't been doing it long enough to give you any like experiential. From what I understand is if you create an environment with enough good biology, it tends to manage the harmful nematodes. So like your root feeding nematodes. If you create an environment where you pull in what they call predatory nematodes, they tend to like the root feeders, you know. And it doesn't mean they won't just eat like the bacterial or the fungal feeder nematodes, but what we try to do is create an environment that has the right biology within that. And with the worm compost that I make, the recommendation is about 20% by volume with how you use it on your, let's say, in your starts. As far as on the soil itself, I don't know if 20% is a viable economic option. That's just a lot of money to put on the ground. So you can do different things like making teas or extracts to hit the soil. I say more economically, I guess, is one way to put it.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on aerated static piles for compost?
They're good. They just take some time to break down. You just have to make sure that you're not creating an anaerobic environment. And so what you would look for things like that would be like those white, whenever you guys, if any of you guys have ever done composting and you turn a pile and you see like this white ashy layer, then that's a possible anaerobic condition. It could be that you don't have enough moisture in there or too much moisture or, compaction, which creates um, an anaerobic condition. So just be careful of that. Some people will do is they'll build like a big pile of wood chips or a pile of compost, and then they'll put, their scraps in different places. You got to be careful just putting it on top and on top and on top. It just doesn't have time to break down.
Yeah. There is a question in the chat asking about the financial benefits with your product. So
yeah.
I think the question is specifically for you, like how financially viable is it? And I guess too, I'd like to add to that of how can a beginner be successful financially, like from your experience?
I can't answer that because I don't have the experience. The only experience that I would say that I have is last year, when basically what I did is I just made compost and I put it down on the ground after I tarped it. I didn't have to weed wherever I used my compost. Some compost that I've used from like a big box store was just weeding. So in my mind, the cost benefit would be the time weeding, just less weeding. So that's something it's going to take me some time to learn and disseminate that information.
Great. There's also a question about bokashi pre-composting. Have you experimented with using this method, fermenting food waste prior to adding it to compost worm bins?
I played with bokashi probably 10 years ago. I didn't use it on worms at the time. I just buried it in the soil. And I would say that from what I've heard, worms love it. It's just breaking it down, putting it in the soil, and then the worms tend to like that, the biology on that. Again, they're gonna chew on the biology, right? So whatever food source you use for your worms is about the kind of biology you're going to get as an end product. If you just feed it like we'll say fruit, for instance, you're going to get a lot of, biology that the fruit would provide, probably a lot of bacteria, but not necessarily a bad thing, because then the bacteria would draw in, if you've got like a bacterial feeding nematode or protozoa, so I'd be curious to see what kind of bacteria or what kind of biology would come out of a bokashi uh, kind of worm bin experiment.
Yeah. And on the note of looking at the biology, so how do you, before you had talked about making sure that your numbers are right with the different different organisms. So how do you do that? How do you look at all of that under the slide? What is your protocol for that?
So the with the Soil Food Web School, there's what they call an S map. So what it is we look at 5 fields of view, or 5 readings, 5 fields of view underneath the microscope slide at the 400 micro 400x view. And then what we do is we count the amount of the number of protozoa. We'll count the number of fungal spores, or not spores, my bad. The fungal hyphae, and we'll do length and we'll do width, and then we apply that within a program that they have to give the total biomass available there. Then what we do is we measure the number of bacteria, same range, and we're looking for ciliates. Ciliates would be an indication of something moving anaerobic or potentially anaerobic. It's not a bad thing. It's just like kind of a marker to look for. And then we put all those numbers in. It'll run the complete the number of the number of bacteria, the number and volume of fungal hyphae. Same thing with the protozoas as well, and nematodes. Nematodes we count just a little bit differently than them, but we still look through the whole slide to see how many there are and which ones are there.
Great. Thanks, Jason. I think that's all the questions we have from the chat, and I think we're going to transition over to Dan.
So I'll just stop
Casey, are
sharing.
you going to be?
I'm here. I can transition into Dan and introduce him. So Dan is the owner and farmer at Perkins Good Earth Farm. He is known as the cover crop guy in Northwest Indiana. Perkins Good Earth Farm utilizes no-till, permanent deep compost beds, and is a certified organic farm. The farm generates a good living and lifestyle for their family of 6, and Dan has over 16 plus years of experience in organic and conventional crop management and growing experience in Iowa, Maine, Massachusetts, and Indiana. So I will turn it over to Dan. You can share your screen and take it away.
All righty. Thank you, everybody. Thank Casey and the Urban Soil Health Program. You guys do a lot of good, necessary work. So thank you for your efforts there. Let me just get this shared here. Okay, can everyone see? I can't see what you're seeing, so someone, Casey, maybe you can let me know if stuff's showing up or not.
Yep.
That looks good.
Okay, you can see my title screen there.
Yes.
Okay, all right, I'll just keep talking. I can't see the chat, but if we'll just kind of hold questions till the end, or if there's really one pertinent, just interrupt me, Casey, if you don't mind. Many of you are familiar with our operation. We've been around just long enough, I think. And so I was asked today to talk about compost and how we use it practically on our farm and how we produce it. So I will quickly do a quick intro to the farm. Casey did a great description there. And we really provide the veggies our customers need and love. Pretty much everything is sold off our farm. within 10 miles or so. And we raise vegetables in Northwest Indiana. So that little red Google pin is where we're at. So we are rural, but still very close to urban areas. Our closest town, DeMont, which is where we get our leaves from, which I'll talk specifically about today in much detail, is a town of about 6,000, maybe 15,000 if you include all the subdivisions that are rapidly surrounding us. I farm with my wife. She is 51% of the business in terms of ownership, and probably 80% of the actual success. So I credit her with a lot. I just am simply growing stuff and having fun in the fields. She's the one that actually makes money. So, and then we have kids ages 15 through 8. You can see them there. And it is truly a joy to live a lifestyle and have a vocation that meets all my passions. And yeah, I'm just so thankful that I get to do this and share this with you guys. So hopefully that comes through. One of the things that really drives us on our farm, of course, the soil health principles. Many of you don't know those. I'm not going to reiterate those, but what I want to share is what it's done for us. Our no-till deep compost system on 1.25 acres, that's how much we farm, and we make a good middle-class living on it. And it's fundamentally rooted in soil health being financially viable. So when we bought the place in 2009, it was 1.9%. CC of 4.4, so basically crappy. And you can kind of see the 6-inch depth and then to 12-inch depth, how it really turns into beach sand. And so through compost soil health principles, we've been able to almost more than triple our organic matter on average in our CEC. So that's, again, because we use compost so heavily, this was really fast in how we were able to do this, especially as we moved away from tillage and really focused on diversity and soil coverage. So soil health and practice must be ecologically truthful as well as financially truthful. And I will say this of composting too. And so Jason, I appreciate your honesty with kind of the vermiculture and where you're at as from a business perspective. Let's talk in 3 to 4 years when you really get things going. Because I think there is so here's our operation, what it looks like from above. And our composting area is on the bottom half of the screen. You kind of see some silage tarps and then some typical windrows. So I'll talk in detail about that, but I kind of wanted to give you just an overall view of what we're dealing with here. We are a vast and diverse organism. I really view our farm as a micro kind of ecosystem. It's quite fun to think about it that way. Financially, so 2019, I actually quit my day job and started farming full time. Took us about 10 years to really go from a cornfield to this and really feel comfortable being, an entrepreneur and starting our own business. So this past year, our gross sales just from the vegetable side of things was that in terms of gross sales. So just want to share that, not as any sort of bragging, but when you do it right and with, lots of thinking and financial analysis, soil health really can be profitable. I predict it probably costs us 40% less to produce our vegetables with our system, with the soil health based system, than a conventional model. So it makes our vegetables affordable in a rural area is the crux of it. So compost use. Okay, so why? Obviously, Jason hinted at this, biological plant food. It is the engine that drives our vegetable production, right? Is having a good source of biological plant food. Soil health principles. I started with kind of really poor soils, really vulnerable to wind erosion, and also shouldn't really be used to grow vegetables. Low water holding capacity, And then the fact that we were trying to produce vegetables, you know, we measure things by 100-foot beds. You know, we're producing 3 or 4 crops per bed. So really we farm 3 acres, not an acre and a quarter. But so initially, you know, we tried making commercial grade compost, and, you know, 5 days at 115 plus to kind of get weeds and disease out of there. This involved lots of turning with tractors. You know, we had a manure spreader here pictured, lots of time, lots of monitoring. And so really as I've become much more business minded, and because I have to feed my children with our business and myself and our community, it really becomes a question of time allocation versus return for your activity. And so when we think about it that way, you have to really pare down, okay, what is the goal of this compost? So a farm or a gardener, you know, is it just a base level thing, or is it a inoculating compost? So we'll kind of talk through that a little bit. But in terms of our story, I kind of just looked at, okay, I have soils that are low in carbon. That's the crux of it. How do I get more carbon into my soils? Okay, living roots, but that takes a long time. That's kind of my long-term plan as a cover cropper. But how do we build it fast so that I can produce vegetables, you know, the next year? Well, Leaves, our town of DeMont, has a small collection program, and it turns out they need a place to dump them. And so back, I think in 2016, 17, I started accepting them. The town told me at that time that I needed to be a permitted facility from IDEM. And that sounds scary, but the beauty of this is that I don't take manure. I don't take, you know, hazardous waste, kitchen scrap. I don't take like real liquidy stuff. So the requirements are not that difficult. Depending on the administration and I don't know, it just seems I've had to renew my application now 3 times. First time was fairly easy, submit a soils report, which I know how to do. They didn't require like an engineering plan because I wasn't dealing with manure or any sort of liquidy things. So I was very upfront with them, just said straight leaves. And I had to dig a little soil pit and show that the water table wasn't, you know, that the leaves weren't going to be sitting in a pond, basically is what I was trying to prove. So initial application, and then annually, I just have to report how many cubic yards or tons of leaves I get. And that's easy because the town, they have their 2 trucks, a 15-yard truck and a 26-yard truck. So they just keep track of how many loads they dump. So last year, or this past fall, we took 440 cubic yards of leaves. So that's basically, to kind of give you a visual, that's a pile that's probably, once you kind of pile it all up into one, a pile that's about 100-foot long by 30-foot wide by 12-foot high. So that's fairly big, and I'll show you a picture of that. So it's a lot of leaves, but by the time you're done composting it, and I'll show some kind of steps of that, you're pretty much down to half that size. Well, actually 3/4 that size. So you can fit a lot in a small space. And I really began to ask, okay, what is free and available, right? Like I can't afford to buy in that much material, compost. And then here's an image of the leaf truck being dumped. That's one of their bigger trucks. And then from there, we pile it. I hire a neighbor with an articulated loader who comes in 3 times a year and turns it. It's relatively cheap to do that. Now, many of you may have heard that leaves could be a negative if you just take those leaves and then incorporate them into the soil. And in that sense, they very much can be. They're almost like incorporating wood chips into your soil, like never a good idea. But for me, they were relatively weed free, not trash free, but we just kind of pick through that as we see stuff. So there's a couple different ways you can use leaves in kind of a farm or garden situation. Sheet composting, and I'll show you a picture of kind of how we did this a little bit. If you have an area that's grass or pasture, you can spread up to 3 inches, and the grass will just punch right through it. So my neighbor actually does this on some of his pasture, again, because the leaves are free and the town's looking for them. As a mulch, so any beds I cannot cover crop or don't have enough significant crop residue on, I do end up taking leaves that are at least a year old, and using it as a kind of a mulch cover. And then leaf cold composted, which I think a lot of you are what you want to kind of hear about today. That's where this has been not thermophilically composted, but just what I call a fungal based composting for 2 to 3 years. And then once that's finished, I take 1 to 2 inches of that and apply it to all my beds each year. So that's essentially my fertility program, if that makes sense. That's my carbon maintaining system. Okay, so leaf cold compost, that's a process, or leaf mold. You kind of hear different things. Basically, you turn these once or twice a year for 3 years. If I was able to turn it twice or 3 times a year, I could probably speed this process up, but then it would become much more bacterial based, in my opinion. And I'm really doing this for water holding and stable organic matter. So when you look, this is a compost analysis of leaves that have been turned once a year for 3 years. This was just taken last year. I've taken tests like this every year since 2016, and they always come out the same. So I pretty much don't have to test anymore. And it's really about, your organic matter, which is loss of ignition. So this would be the same method used on a soil test. We're at 30% organic matter. Or I like to say 15%, because that's what the total carbon is. And then you also can see the pH there. Someone asked a question about pH. It's 7.2. So it's not going to harm your soil. It's not going to cause major problems. Some soil tests have been as low as 6.5, probably just because that's the year the trees took up more calcium, a little more lime in a sense, calcium carbonate, in that growing year. And so you can see the carbon nitrogen ratio, 23 to 1. Soil is typically in anywhere from that 20 to 30 to 1 ratio. So I have essentially a soil medium when I'm done with this process. This particular product right off our farm has been used in some Purdue studies. Here's one looking at tomato production and inoculating the leaf compost with trichoderma, and some other details, but just kind of cool that, like, what I intuitively thought and knew and tested a little bit, I never have gotten out a microscope to look at stuff. Jason, maybe I'll send you a sample. We can talk about that. I'd like to kind of know, but as a farmer, when I look at, okay, theoretically this compost should be good. It's a fungal based compost as opposed to a bacterial based compost. That's what I want. And then when you look at the micronutrients, which I could show you that, I mean, they're pretty low from a agronomy standpoint, but because I'm adding an inch every year, I actually have stopped putting on any sort of like micronutrients largely, because I'm getting a continual supply from these leaves, which is kind of exciting. Again, it reduces my cost of production. Okay, I want to back up a little bit, because we were at 1.9% organic matter, right? And CEC of 4. That first year, once I got a good amount of leaf compost buildup, so 2 or 3 years, I had some guys come in with big conventional spreaders, and just on each plot that we grow on, we have 16 of them now, I just had them spread 12 inches of this stuff. And what was interesting was, when I soil tested this 2 years later, that stuff had gone from 15% total carbon down to about 3 or 4% organic matter. So that's really where my growth in organic matter is coming from, and then I've just been further building it from there. So I think this is a really important kind of. It's like I'm making a really big bed, right? But all at once and efficiently. In 2018, local compost that was manure based, and this is thermophilic compost, USCC certified. They have 20 acres. It's really what I considered like a good base compost. I've used 126 yards of this in the last couple of years. And then since my nutrient levels are at a sufficient levels, if not more, I don't really need manure-based compost. Hence the leaf compost, how important that is to my system in the long run. So, okay, compost specifics. I want to make sure here I'm okay on time. So our compost area is 65 foot wide by 225 foot wide. So from a production standpoint, this would basically be two of my plots. So it is taking up valuable production space, but it is also really important resource for me since it's free. So I'll just give you some quick numbers. This is 2019. I collect wood chips from area tree trimmers, stump grinder guys. They're always looking for places. And we had 45 yards that year. And I use this largely in my wood chip pathways and for mulching perennials, using in my lanes. I kind of use it like gravel, actually. Works fairly well because we are so well drained. Purchase compost. So this is the manure-based compost I purchased in. And I have a black fabric, breathable, like highly specialized fabric that keeps that stuff weed free and also at the right moisture. And then what happens is, here's leaves from year one piled up. I took a smaller amount of leaves that year because I just didn't have room, hadn't really expanded yet. And then leaf year 2 and then year 3. So that third circle in the middle there, that's where I can take from and use it as a amendment on my beds or combine it with a manure-based compost. And that's really where the economics of this have played out really nicely. That blue circle is basically manure-based compost and my leaf mold mixed together 50-50. And then I use that inside my tunnels where I need a little more nutrients, but also I sell it to home gardeners and area farmers that are looking for both a bacterial-based product and a fungal-based product. And then that blue square there is where the next fall, all my leaves will come in and they'll basically take up that whole area. They'll sit for a year, and then the next year, after I've sold all the stuff that's to the north of that, it can just flip-flop back and forth, and then over by my wood chips and finished compost, that's where those piles, since I'm pretty much selling or using all of it every year, it works really, really well in that space. So it's taken me a while to kind of figure out how to do that, but it's minimal pile movement, like I said. So 2021, so 2 years later, lots more wood chips as we expanded our kind of no-till permanent bed system. We also purchased a lot more compost, the manure-based, because we were selling a lot more of it. So there it is, 2 semi-trailer loads basically is what 44 yards are. And then you can see 2 years later, my leaf pile has now shifted to that area. And you can see the amounts there for those interested. So you can kind of see basically that 250 yards gets turned into 90 yards. So that's how much shrinkage there is. And these are rough estimates of the sizes. And then we got a Perkins mix down kind of at the end. So this system works for us at scale. I do have a small bucket loader, but I really don't manage the piles much with those. I just mix my 50-50 mix largely. And then, hiring that neighbor in, I think it cost me maybe $800. So like $200 or $300 a time, and then bartering vegetables. He also is a landscaper, so he dumps his leaves. It's not all that much in comparison, but then we kind of work out a deal. So it works for everybody. And then I don't have to maintain or have a piece of equipment like that. So in 2022, we sold 200 yards of this, what I call the Perkins mix, just to give it a name, I guess. And we sold that in 5-gallon buckets. You know, people bring in trash cans. They bring in a trailer. They want a yard or two. You know, I can load them with that, or bigger loads as needed. And I say this because this becomes a income stream, and it's an income stream I never envisioned happening. I just kind of grew into it, because I appreciate and value, you know, compost so much. Okay, economics. So if you purchase base quality compost, which is what I purchase, you'll typically pay, you know, $40 a yard. This would be the stuff that, I'm going to say this very carefully, you could get from your local municipality area, although I would highly question that whether that's been properly composted. But if you're going to buy stuff that's, you know, at least compost certified, and has a turning and a CO2 record, that's the number one thing I say. If you're going to get compost or recommend it, make sure whoever you're getting it from can produce a, you know, a minimum of compost turning record, and even better, a CO2 tracking record. Both those things are important to create a good compost. And also, what feed or raw ingredients are they using to make that compost? You know, something like Vermicompost, which I would consider kind of like the quality of quality, which you're going to pay for, has a really diverse mix and is highly managed, and it shows. So something like that, Vermicompost, Dairy Dew has some stuff that's, you know, it's taken 18 plus months, and you're going to pay $50 a yard to even more. And then highest quality. So highest quality would be that Dairy Dew or Vermont. Sorry, I said that wrong. You're going to be paying $70 to $200 a yard, depending what kind of stuff you can get. And again, the purpose of each of these three types of compost, you have to know what it is so that the money you're going to spend is worth it. So when I look at farm aid, like my labor, fuel, machinery time, cold compost, it probably takes me about $20 a yard to make by the time I look at taking land out of production, and also just managing that. If I was to make inoculating compost, so if I was to spend a little more time, well, actually, this is twice as much time in terms of just it taking up space, highest quality, even more per yard. So I really can't make it for that much cheaper, is I guess is what I'm getting at, except the cold compost area, because you largely can't even get non-manure based compost, which is really what I was looking for. So generally, a farmer should always buy it in, unless, like Jason was doing at a small scale, where you have a specific high value crop or something where you can do that. Or in my case, where I can get the lease for free, I can get the management of those piles really cheaply. That's the name of the game. Some of my key resources here, I'll just list here, in terms of just small farm, no-till farming, and also just learning about compost. The No-Till Growers Network has an actual specific composters podcast, which is just fascinating. I love listening to that podcast while managing my compost. It just seems fitting. And here's some other resources as well. All right. Let's stop sharing my screen here so I can.
And say we have a few questions. This one's kind of a two-part question. Of what's your primary recommendation for growers who want to get started with on-site leaf composting?
I don't know if there's any.
Oh, did I freeze?
No, Casey, I can hear you. You're
Okay.
good.
Hello, Terry. Did we lose?
Yeah, I think you're a little choppy, but you're back. Maybe. Yeah, when technology fails. So Dan, Casey, what was the question you were asking?
Oh, there we go. So what is your primary recommendation for growers who want to get started with on-site leaf composting?
My primary recommendation would be to think about, okay, what's my end product gonna look like? What do I need it to look like? So for me, I have some farm buddies that can buy leaf compost in that's been screened. It's really relatively cheap, if not free. This is out on the East Coast, and so they don't need to make it. So think about it that way. First, ask yourself: is there a way to get a finished product pretty cheap? Secondarily, if you are going to make it, if you're going to take up space and time, and allocate your time or one of your employees, or and I'm talking at a commercial scale here of any size, does that leaf compost need to be sifted? Like for me, I spend a little extra time right before we spread it on our fields or our beds, turning it a couple times because it is kind of chunky. Because we haven't turned it a lot, we're not using a windrow turner. It has some chunk to it. So often, where I'm really putting stuff down, it's where I can mulch my tomato plants or our garlic or our potatoes. That way, I get away with not having a fine product, right? If you want to go in and take that leaf compost and directly seed lettuce into it, it's going to be challenging to do that unless you're really spending a lot of time breaking it up. So there is a caveat there. But if you properly plan it out, it can work pretty well.
Great. There's a second part to that question. How do you think SWCD staff can support large or small scale municipal collection projects that partner with growers for leaf composting?
Yeah, I know, like Don Lamb, who's the ISDA director, he has a composting site on his farm. So I think it's almost like it would be wonderful. My vision would be if every county had a area, a commodity farmer, that had some land and some equipment and was willing to like have a composting site. And you're going to need someone who's interested and willing to manage that. So I think it's about partnership, like how do you get someone with the land base and the time and equipment? I think, there's some landscapers that could potentially be a possible source. It could be a value added product for them. Often the landscapers and others that are doing stuff with home scale gardeners or greenhouse nursery centers, they're buying stuff in. So yeah, I don't know if that's off the top of my head.
No, I think that's great. Considering partners and people that we don't usually work with, we could, all benefit from each other and possibly in some way, for sure. There is another question. How close can the leaf compost pile be to your garden growing area while it's breaking down over those 3 years? Would the soil underneath be ideal to use as a new grow bed?
Yeah, good question. I think you have to be really careful with site selection. You know, an area that's a low spot or so thinking about, okay, how do you build that area up? How do you divert water away becomes really important. I'm very lucky that I don't have to consider those. I'm more concerned about getting native soil mixed in with the leaf compost because then I get weed seed. So I actually I've started putting down like a 3-inch layer of wood chips since I have so many wood chips. And then as I'm digging or putting compost in or turning it, when I start to hit wood chips, I know I need to not go any deeper. The area that had the windrow on it would not make good growing areas because there's been a lot of equipment, like all the leaf trucks, semi-trailers coming in, people's cars, trailers, my tractor. Yeah, it just wouldn't be, I'd have to deep rip it and do some remediation if I was going to turn it into grow areas. 6 years ago, I did do compost in a different area and we did just that. And now it's producing fine. But I think you have to think about compaction and what kind of traffic has gone in that area.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions, I think, maybe time for one more. But have you ever thought about a straw bale blower that's used to reduce straw bales to mulch for speeding up your process?
Yeah, that's actually a good idea. I like that. I think I'm actually thinking of getting a windrow turner, like one that mounts to the back of a tractor, just a smaller one. Because in effect, that would give me that effect and also enable me to produce some high quality compost or just to experiment more and create a finer product. But yeah, a straw blower could do it. A straw blower could also put the leaf mulch onto my beds efficiently. That right there might be worth it. Since we do it by, 3 wheelbarrows and a tractor bucket, which makes it pretty efficient, but it's still pretty labor intensive to do that. Yeah. Whoever asked that question, let me know. Maybe they already have one and are doing it.
Okay, we've got one last question. And it is, do you have any thoughts on aerated static pile for compost method?
Yes. So a couple years ago, I took a bounce house blower, and you'll see this on YouTube. People that kind of make their own aerated static piles. I think there's a lot of validity to it. Generally, my opinion is that it's used for areas that are really tight on space and have lots of neighbors and stinky manure piles, like horse farms. And I tried it. I layered it, properly, brown, green, brown, green, brown. And at the end of the day, it created a somewhat nice product. I still had to get in there with my tractor, turn it, move it to a different spot to get my pipes out. And so for me, it wasn't ideal because, again, I was looking for the cheapest, most fungal based system. Because I have a lot of carbon. I don't have access to a lot of green, hot stuff, manure basically. And nor did I really want to deal in manure. Fresh manure and vegetables don't go together well. So I am really careful of that consideration. But I think for some folks, I think it could work at a really small scale. I wouldn't rule that out. And then if you're really tight on space and have the certain raw ingredients, if you're in an area that has some sort of resources like that, it might very well be a good option. out on the West Coast, there's a lot of them because of the amount of rain they get. And typically the ones that are designed and built are very expensive. That's the ones I've seen used, by municipalities or, bigger horse farms that have a lot of manure to deal with, or if you're doing animal mortality, that kind of stuff.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for your time and your answers and your information that you've shared with us. We appreciate it. And I guess we'll just move on into the next portion of our call.
All righty. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to head out. Stay warm.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Can you guys see that? Is there anything loading?
Got a little circle do that's doing a dance.
There we go. Okay. Okay, we're going to hop right into our regional updates. I will hand it over to the Northwest.
Thank you, Casey. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Marian Rodriguez. I'm with the Urban Soil Program in the Northwest. And I'm going to share just a few things I'm working on in this month and events that I have attended. So I attended the Indiana Association of Soil and Water Conservation Districts annual conference. And for those of you that I was lucky enough to see and engage in conversations, thank you. And I'm excited for what's to come in this year. And then I'm also working on a presentation with Liz Maynard on bolting of spring leafy vegetable crops. And we're going to present that at the Everything Local conference later this week. And then I'm also giving a soil health program at a vegetable meeting in Porter County. If you have any questions about anything I'm working on, just reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to answer them. Next, we have Terry in the Northeast.
Good morning. I'm Terry Thyssen. I'm from the Northeast. Like the rest of the team, I attended the association meeting in Indy. Got to meet a lot of great people. So thanks for all of the people that were able to attend that. And I had a really good time for my first time in the 81st association meeting. I've been working with different counties to get working groups up and running. So I'm really excited. Madison County is going to be signing up to start a working group. And we've got a couple of others kind of thinking about it. So hopefully we can get those towards the finish line for getting working groups. Did a site visit in Delaware County, invited along with NRCS. It was just really neat. It was right before the holiday when the weather was still really nice, and seeing a farm that's been in production for a while and then took about 2 years off. So it was neat just to kind of see the land and have the tour from the farmer. I also got invited by St. Joe County Soil and Water to write an article for their newsletter. So thank you to them. I really enjoyed writing an article for them on soil health. And then personally, I finally got my link pass 3 months in. I'm officially official. And then this week, today, tomorrow, and the day after that is the Fort Wayne Farm Show. So for those folks that are in the Fort Wayne area, I welcome you to come out to the farm show. It's free to attend. Parking, I believe, is like $7. So hopefully we can see some of you folks out there. And then also I forgot to put it on here, but we've got an event up in Goshen coming up this Saturday. It is the seed swap. So I will also be tabling there and giving out cover crop seeds at that event. It'll be this Saturday. So if you guys are up in the Northeast region and want to go to a super cool seed swap, I put the link in the chat. Thank you. That's all I got for the Northeast.
Thanks, Terry. Hi, everybody. A little highlight from the Southwest area. Back in December before break, I attended the State Soil Health Team meeting that was held at Byron Seeds in Rockville. It was nice to get the whole state team together and talk about planning for this upcoming year. That was exciting. Also attended the IASWCD conference where I saw quite a few of you there. Like everyone else, we're definitely excited for this year and, these working groups and what they've got planned. I've also condensed and completed that site visit and technical form for the working groups. So it was 4 pages each, and now we've condensed that down. So that should be easier for the working groups to use. Things that I'm working on. We're doing some planning meetings for 2024 with the local working groups, scheduling some events and seeing what their goals and focus are. So excited for that, as well as attending annual meetings. If there are any SWCDs that would like any information or program material for your meetings, please reach out. I'm happy to attend as well as bring some things. And then something that I'm working on is Vigo County is doing a backyard conservation series this spring. So we're getting some ideas and planning for that as well. So then we'll go to the Southeast. Is anybody going to update for Megan, or should I do that?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, that's that's just fine. So I will share for the Southeast. For Megan, just like the rest of us, she enjoyed seeing lots of faces at the conference this year. She's sweated through a compost pile move for the 2024 Move That Pile kickoff for the Hanover Compost Cooperative. Hanover College is doing an amazing project there that she's helping out with that. That's really awesome. And she's also meeting with all the districts and planning lots of engagement for 2024. Some upcoming events. She's got Union County SWCD's Community Prairie Planning event, January 20th. That's at 12:30 at the UC Nature Park. It's a seeding 10 acres of native pollinators. She's still working on that season extension workshop. Session 5 is going to be via Zoom, January 23rd from 6 to 8. She'll be working with Kentucky Center for Agriculture and Rural Development to plan financials for season extension, as well as listening to Solway Farm regarding how season extension changed their financial model. Switzerland County SWCD is having a small scale ag breakfast January 26th from 8:30 to 11 at the Switzerland County TEC building. And here's some, I think, a picture from the working group that probably received a certificate at the conference for their efforts of starting a working group. The farmers keep it growing all year long. That event, and then the conservation breakfast in Switzerland County. That flyer is there as well. Some conferences and events and things coming up. January 22nd and 23rd is the Indiana Hort Conference. That'll be at the Hendricks County Fairgrounds. January 31st is an Urban Ag and Innovation Production Federal Advisory Committee meeting. That's going to be virtual from 2 to 3. February 13th and 14th is the Midwest Cover Crop Council annual meeting and conference, and that will be held in Indianapolis. February 22nd through 24th is the Marble Seed National Organic Conference in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And I believe that our whole team is going to be attending that. So that's exciting for us and to be there and to learn some things to bring back to you as well. The Indiana Small Farms Conference will be in Hendricks County at Danville again this year, February 29th and March 1st. And then March 19th is the Indiana Grown Symposium, and that will also be at the Hendricks County Fairgrounds in Danville. Ellie, is there any comments that you want to make on these or just highlighting these events?
Really just highlighting those events, and thank you again for all the conversations at the association annual conference. The big news highlight, you can check on CCSI for the transition to having the breakfast at the State House was, I think, a real hit. Some adjustments to do on timing, but as far as I observed and talked with people, those conversations with legislators were more impactful and made a big splash with the soil health demos and cover crop root tubes. And also just a thank you to all of the local working groups. We had many who received a new certificate of appreciation for their participation. And last thing to highlight here was that I just saw this come out. Somebody had shared it with me. That's a new SARE bulletin on best practices for the sustainable urban farm. I haven't given it a deep read, but it's pretty broad and goes into a lot of the components of mostly urban and really small scale operations in more densely populated areas, but there's a lot of crossover, as you know, with small scale farms everywhere. So everything from land access, soil remediation, water access, season extension, pest management. So take a look and see if that could be a resource that would be beneficial for having at your soil and water offices or others and used as a handout. You can order PDFs on the SARE resources site. That's all.
Well, we'll open up this time for any partner shares. We've got about 9 minutes left. If there's anyone on the call that has anything they'd like to share, now's the time, and we appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Jesus Rosario with Allen County Soil and Water Conservation District. I've got a webinar. It's our Coffee and series coming up. It's going to be every fourth Friday. So this next Friday, the 26th at 10 a.m. If anybody's interested, I can have the link available. And I'll be talking about winter tasks for urban gardeners and basically I kind of touching on the Bokashi method a little bit from what I've seen and read about, basically just sharing that information. So if you guys are interested in that, more than welcome to join.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Okay. I will move on. Our next meeting will be February 20th, 2024. I believe we've had to push that back a week, so that won't be the second Tuesday. But our topic is going to be the nutrient management calculator. I believe Kevin Allison will be going over that. So please join us. We will send out this recording as well as a reminder for that meeting soon. So thank you everyone for your time. Have a great day.